Yeah, it's me again. This is the second tutorial on creating a logo for your DTP projects. It says across the top, scrolling text, welcome to my crazy world of video experimentation and GIMP tutorial. In fairness, it's not very crazy, and the video experimentation is actually just me playing around with the video software to see what I could do with it. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on with what we're supposed to be doing here. So to the left of me, you can see a pencil sketch, which was emailed to me by Nathan, a proposed logo for the fictitious Devilish design company. So I thought I'd have a quick look at how I might create that using GIMP. Now, I kind of proposed a couple of changes to the way that looks at the minute. So I thought I'd go for using the 2Ds from Devilish Design as the actual eyes on the devil's head. And I've kind of put a flame effect into the iris of each eye. Now, I also used the company name, Devilish Design. I put that up between the two horns of the devil's head and gave it a little bit of a kind of a red glow effect around the outside edge. Yeah, I have a bit of red block underneath me here with more text scrolling. Ooh, get me, as it says. Don't worry, that's the end of me playing around with the kind of video effects, pretty much. So let's get on with producing the image on the left-hand side of me here. First things first, we need to get the devil's head. Now, you could draw this from scratch. It's probably not that complicated, but if you can find a royalty-free image online, in other words, one that's not going to have copyright issues, should you ever be doing this commercially. So find a royalty-free image, it'll save you quite a bit of time in terms of producing the rest of it. So I found the one that's underneath me here. Preferably find a PNG image with a transparent background, because again, it'll save you a bit more time. Unfortunately, whoever created this particular PNG didn't exactly do a fantastic job because they left these two white lumps in between the horns. Maybe that's intentional, but I can't for the life of me see why. No matter, once we go into GIMP, we can actually get rid of those unsightly white lumps. So let's actually have a look at what we need to do there. Now, I've already brought the image into GIMP. Again, if you remember from our first lesson, if you find an image online that you kind of like to use and it's royalty free, right click on the image, say copy image, and then you can go to File, Create from Clipboard. And once you've copied the image, you'll be able to create the image from Clipboard. And hey presto, you'll get what I've got here. Now, if you've gone File and Save Image from the one you found online, or if you've gone right click, sorry, and save image, then you'll be looking to find that file. So you'll be going File and Open, and then you'll browse to wherever the file actually is. Okay, this is a bit too small to be working with the way it is at the minute, so I'm going to increase the size of the image. So I'm going to go to Image, and we're going to scale the image. And I want to make this just over twice the size it currently is, kind of a nice area to work with. So you'll see these two values are linked. So when I change the width here, I'm going to change it to 500, which is just over double. Press enter, you'll see it automatically change the height for me as well. So now all I have to do is press on scale. And there we go. That's much easier to work with. Now we want to get rid of that kind of white lump, whatever that was supposed to be at the top. So again, I would kind of suggest to use the fuzzy select tool because it's all one solid color, the devil's head. So the fuzzy select tool is the little magic wand in our toolbox. Click once on that. And again, if you remember from the first lesson, I would always recommend you leave this on add to the current selection. There are occasions where you might want to do something different, but for the purposes of what we're doing, leave it on add to selection, because if you need to select more than one area, it will just keep on adding to your current selection. Now in our particular case, this won't matter because we're only going to be selecting the one anyway. Threshold, I'll just remind you of what that is again as well. Threshold is basically how similar the color is that it's going to pick when you click on the image. Again, it's not going to matter on this picture because it's all the one color that we're selecting. But let's say you really put this value up to a much higher value. then when you click on a red, even if there was kind of orange in the surrounding areas, it would also pick those, because the higher the threshold, basically the more colors that it will pick that are similar to the color that you've clicked on. The lower the threshold, so if you brought this right down to kind of 1 or 2, then it will only pick exactly the same color that you've clicked on. Anyway, back to ours. All we need to do is click once. Hey presto, we have the whole of the devil's head and horns selected, as you'll see in the top right hand corner here. And now we can copy that. I'm just going to use Control and C to copy that. And then I'm going to go File, Create from Clipboard. And hey presto, we have got rid of those white lumps, whatever they were supposed to be. So we can get rid of that image, don't need that anymore. Now I need to work on this. Now, on my image, I kind of had the actual company name Devilish Design in between the horns. Now there's not really enough space here for that at the minute, so I need to make these horns bigger, and I need to make the image higher so as I can work up above what we've currently got. It's no use going to image and scale image like we did at the start, because that will just make the whole thing bigger. There'll still be no gap between the horn here and the top of the actual image. And I want to create a blank area at the top here. So what I'm actually going to be doing is increasing what's called the canvas size. So it's image, and we're going to go down to canvas size. Now, if you think about it, when a painter's doing his work, he's theoretically working on a canvas, and the bigger the canvas, the bigger area he's got to work in. And it's kind of the same with what we're doing here. Now, I don't want to increase the width. I only want extra space at the top. So make sure this link is broken so that when you increase the height, it will only increase the height and not the width. Now, I want around 750 to give me that extra space at the top. Now, if I just do that now, click on resize, it's not going to do what I want it to, and we'll see why. Okay, now what you see, we've got extra space at the bottom here. That's absolutely no use at all, because I wanted it at the top. So I'm going to step back. Control and Z will actually step back one, or you can go to the edit menu and undo. I want to go back into our canvas size, so image and canvas size. Now, what we have to do here is tell it where we want the extra space. So you have an offset X and Y axis. Going back to mathematics at school, X is your axis going along the bottom horizontally. Y is the vertical axis going up the page. So Y0 is at the bottom of the devil's head, and Y594, which is what we've got there, is at the top, right at the top of the horn. So we want our extra space to start at 594. So I'm going to put 750 back in the box here. 750. And in the Y value, I'm going to tell it to start at 594, which was the top of the original image. And then I'm going to go resize. And there we go. We have the space we wanted at the top of the picture, which is exactly where we wanted it. Now there's still a problem. You can see a line across the top here, just above the horns. It's because the extra canvas size we've created is not currently part of the layer, so I still can't work on it as it is at the minute. So we have one further thing to do, and that's to go to the layer, and we want to say layer to full image size. So resize the layer to be the full size of the image. And there we go. You can see the line disappeared. We can now work in this top area here. So why did I want to do that again? Oh, I wanted to increase the size of these two horns here. So there's a neat little tool in GIMP, which is great for playing around with warping people's faces and all sorts of things. And it's called the Warp Transform tool. Kind of looks like a block with a kind of little wave on the top of it. So I'm going to click on that. Now, just a couple of things about the options underneath here for the Warp Transform tool. I am actually going to be using the one that's called Move Pixels. There are other options here. So there's one for growing the area. which when you select that will, as the name suggests, will actually grow the current area that you're clicked on as you drag the cursor around. Shrink, again, as the name suggests, will shrink the area you're currently selected on as you move the cursor around. Then there's a couple of effects which are kind of just for messing around. Swirling clockwise and anti-clockwise obviously creates a swirly effect. And of course, in case you make a complete hames of it, you can erase the warping effect that you've just done. Now, I'm quite happy with moving pixels. That's what I want to do. Again, you can move the size of the effect. Now, mine's currently set at 40, which is actually okay for what I want. You can see the little circle. That's the size that the effect is going to have. So what I need to do here, you need to basically click and hold with your left button, and you need to keep the left button pressed down for the whole of this. So I'm going to press and hold the left button, and then what you do is you drag the cursor in the direction you want the effect to go. So obviously I want the horns to go up the page a bit and possibly to the side a little. So I'm going to press and hold. So I've got the left button pressed down, and now I can drag. There's one, and I go again. 2, and I'm going to go again. 3, and I'm going to give it another 1 for a good look. 4. Now, you kind of need, I suppose your hand needs to be reasonably steady. This is probably easier with a mouse than it is on the laptop without a mouse. But anyway, I'm going to give it a go, because obviously when you're doing the second one on the right hand side, you're kind of trying to make them symmetrical. Now, these actually, in fairness, weren't perfectly symmetrical to start off with. Anyway, that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. So again, press and hold the left button and drag. There's 1. Drag. 2. And I go again. Drag. 3. And I go another 1. 4. I'm actually going to give this side 1 slight more. There, 5. Okay. They're not perfectly symmetrical, but they're as near as damn it. They'll do me anyway. Okay, so we have our 2 horns kind of heightened up there now. So what's next? We need to do the eyes. Now, if the eyes on my picture, I use the 2Ds from Devilish Design. So we need the text tool, the letter A. I'm going to click on that. I want the color black for the outside of the eye, so we've already got black selected here for our color, which is fine. I quite like the Elephant Italic font. If you don't like that font and you wanted to use a different one, you can obviously click here and you can scroll up or down and select whatever font you want. As I said, I'm happy with Elephant Italic. And now I know from having done this before that the size I want for this letter D is roughly 200 pixels. If you're doing this yourself, you're probably going to have to experiment around with it a little bit just to get the size the way you want it. So I'm ready to go in my first D. Go on to the devil's head, drag a box for the D to go into, and do a capital D. And there we go. And you see, as soon as I did that, if I go over to the bottom right hand corner, we've now got 2 layers. When you create text, GIMP automatically creates a layer for that text. So we now have 2 layers, the bottom red devil's head and a layer for the black D that I've just put on there. Now that's not quite as I want it. I actually want to make that eye bigger, but I don't want to make it any wider. So I just want to increase the height of the D. So because we're working on a layer, I'm going to go to layer and we're going to scale the layer. Now again, you'd probably have to play around with this to get it the way you want it. Now again, I know from having messed with this before, I kind of want this at around about 350 in height. I do not want to change the width, so I need to break this link to make sure it's just the height that's going to change. And we go 350 and scale. And there we go. That's given me pretty much what I want for my letter D. Okay, now the next bit is to put the fire in the iris part of the eye. So just so as we can see exactly what we're doing here, I'm going to turn off the bottom layer, the devil's head layer, so as we can see more what we're doing just on the D. Now remember, over here on the layers menu, these little eye symbols to the right of each layer basically turn the layer on and off in terms of being visible. So I'm going to switch off the bottom one, and there we go, we've just got the D. And you can see it's transparent all the way around it. It's transparent in the middle. I kind of quite like a little white border around the outside edge. Plus, it's easier to select a kind of a white area than it is to do the transparency. So I want to change all of the transparent areas to be a different color. So we're going to go to the layer menu. And we're going to go down to transparency. And what we're doing is the transparent area is actually what's called an alpha channel. So we're going to remove the alpha channel. So transparency, remove alpha channel. And hey presto, we have white everywhere where there was transparency. Now, the reason it's given us white is because if you look over our color selector box over here, the active foreground color is black, the active background color is white. Basically, when you remove the alpha channel, the transparency, it will replace it with whatever your current background color is. And as mine is white, that's what we've got here. So I want to select the middle bit of the eye, diddly eye, and go up to the magic wand again, fuzzy select, and down, and just click anywhere in the center bit of the D. And you can see up on top right here, that's all we've got selected. And the reason that didn't select the rest here is because the fuzzy select tool only selects continuous areas of color. And because there's black all the way around the outside edge of the middle of the D, it stopped at the middle section of the D. Now, if we go back up here, there is another color select tool which will actually allow you to select colors all over the picture, but that's not what we're doing in this particular case. So, okay, we've got it selected. Now, what we want to do next is we want to be inserting a fire image into the center of that D. So, again, you could create the fire image from scratch, but I would kind of suggest searching for it online. The easiest way, search for it online. Now, I just did a search for massive fire pictures. Does what it says on the tin. And I found one on what's called unsplash.com. Again, if it's all possible, make sure, well, actually, not if at all possible, just make sure it's royalty free so you can use it. I quite like this one. It's a very, very big image mind, but it's kind of one I like the look of. So what we want to do is we want to go back into GIMP and see what we can do with that particular image. So I've already got it brought in here. Again, it would have been the same thing as the devil's head. You can right click on the image, say copy image, and then go file and create from clipboard, and in it comes. Now, as you can see, this is huge. I don't need anywhere near this much, and if I tried to put this into the center of the D at the minute, I'd probably only get like just a constant yellow area, and I want the proper fire effect, so I need to reduce the size of this image quite drastically. So, image, scale image, and because the height of my D was 350, I'm going to change this to be the height 350, make the image much smaller, easier to work with. So 350, press enter and press scale. And there we go. That's a much better area to work with. I now want to select all of this area and then copy it. Now I can do Control and A, which will select the whole area. You can see it's all selected over here. Or I could have gone to select and pressed on all. Then Control and C again to copy it. Okay, and now I want to go back to our D. Now I want to paste this into the center of the D. So I'm not just doing a normal paste. If I do a normal paste, it will basically go over the top of this whole area and just obliterate it. So what I want to do is I want to paste into the selection. So if I go to edit, you'll see there's an option to paste into selection. So I'm going to click on that. And there we go. Our fire is now inside the D. Now I don't really like the way that is at the minute. So you can see from our layers menu, we've now got an extra layer, which is our pasted fire image. Every time you paste something onto the current image, it creates a temporary layer called a floating layer. Now that means we can move this around to get it exactly where we want it. So I am going to move it a bit because I don't really like the effect at the minute. I kind of like to have a little bit of black in there with the fire. So I'm going to move that down to about there. I quite like the look of that. That'll do me. So what I want to do now is I want to anchor that into position. You'll see down in the very bottom right hand corner there's a little green box with a picture of an anchor inside it. That will fix our floating layer into position, and the floating layer will stop being there. There we go. We're back to 2 layers. I now have the fire in the center of the D. It's kind of the way I wanted it. So I can get rid of the selection. Select and none. Now what I want to do, I want to turn all this white area around the outside of the D, I want to turn that back into transparency because we don't want a big white block on the devil's face. Okay, so again, we're still on the fuzzy select tool, the magic one, so I'm just going to click on the white, anywhere on the white. And as you can see, the top right here, I've got all the white area now selected. So I want to change that into transparency. So we're kind of doing the reverse of what we did before, where we removed the alpha channel. So we're going layer, transparency, and instead of removing, we're adding the alpha channel. We're adding the transparency. So click on that. Now, that doesn't appear to have done a great deal. Now, the reason for that is there's one extra step we need to do to actually bring that transparency back, and that is to go to Edit and Clear. And hey presto, we have our transparency. Now again, I don't want anything selected anymore, so I'm actually going to say select none because we're kind of finished with having anything selected. So select the none. You can see up here that's now gone from the selection. I'm going to turn back on the bottom layer so as we can see what we're doing with this D now. And you can see I got a nice white effect around the outside edge, around the middle bit, and that's partly because I had what's called a feathered edge on my select of 3 pixels, which gives me this little nice white outline effect around the D because I had that white background. Now what it's also done, which you probably can't quite see from the image at the minute, is it will have also created a slight white line around the outside of this box. So I need to get rid of that because if I start moving this box around, we're going to be left with a faint white box line around the D. And again, we don't want that on the final image. So I'm going to go over to the eraser tool in our toolbox. It looks like a little rubber. I'm going to click on that. Again, you want to make sure you've got this on solid head for the eraser tool. Size, obviously, you can alter up and down to your own heart's content. The size I've got will do me for the minute. And I'm just going to press and hold and drag it along what I want to remove. So it's, as I say, it's probably very hard for you to see on this particular image, but there is a very, very faint white line, box line around the outside of this. So I'm going to press and hold. So I've got the left button pressed. I can now drag around the actual box line and come down. I need to be careful that I don't actually erase any of the actual D itself. Down to the bottom, oops, and along there, and then up. And again, I'm going to be careful I'm not actually getting any of the actual D. So I let my finger off now before moving it up and repositioning it at the other end of that tail of the D. And I'm going to press and hold again and drag up the last bit of the box outline. Okay, that should have gotten rid of the little white outline that would have been there around the box. So now what I want to do is I don't want the eye looking like that. I want it kind of turned a little bit. It needs to have kind of a slanted kind of eye. So I need to rotate this image. So again, you might remember from the first lesson, we have a tool for rotating called, naturally enough, the rotate tool. And I click on that. And I'm going to come back over to our D layer and click on it once. And now again, if you remember, you can up and down the angle here. Again, it's kind of play around with it until you've got it roughly where you want it. I'm going to say that's probably a little bit too much. I'm going to bring it down to about, no, maybe a bit more than that. Let's go. Again, it's kind of a bit of a suck it and see approach. I'm going to try it at that. Rotate. And now I want to move it because obviously I don't want his eye right there because the other one's going to be, he's going to be very weird looking. Well, not that it's going to be normal looking anyway, but it's, yeah, anyway, you get the picture. Let's go to the four-headed arrow, which is our move tool, and move this fella across. So I'm going to have it, I think, about there. Will do me. Okay. Now we want our second eye, and neither you nor I particularly want to go through all that palaver again, so the easiest thing is to duplicate the layer. So we're going to go over to our layers dialog box where the D currently is, and we're going to right click on it, and we're going to select duplicate the layer. So now you'll see we've got three layers. We've got a D number one. You can't tell at the minute from the picture because they're sat exactly on top of each other. Obviously, the second D wants to be kind of the mirror image of the first one, so we need to flip it. Handily enough, we have a flip tool in our toolbox. So make sure that we're on the D+1, the D number one, go over to the toolbox, and this little double-headed arrow fella here is what's called a flip tool. So if we click on that, and if I go down then to our D, now I'm clicking on the second of the Ds, it's on top of the first one. I just click once with the left button. Well, hey, and we have a flipped tool. Now, we want to drag that into position on the face. Now, you could try and do this by hand, but again, unless you are real steady hand Luke, I would suggest you use the arrow keys on your keyboard because we want this basically to stay at exactly the height it's at the minute. And if you try and move it freehand, it's unlikely to stay at the right height. Okay, so I'm using the right arrow key on my keyboard to do this when I go to move it. So click on move, and then I'm just pressing, all I'm doing is pressing the right arrow key. I've got it pressed down, just held down to drag it across. And I'm going to go across, 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 across. And that's roughly where I want it. Okay, that looks reasonable enough to me. So the last bit of our image was to put the actual fictitious company name between the horns here at the top, Devilish Design. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the text tool. I'm going to stick with my elephant italic and black lettering to start off with. But I really don't want the size to be 200. That's way too much. Now, actually, before I put this on here, I'm actually going to put this onto a new layer myself because I'm going to need two layers for this, which I'll explain in a minute. So I'm going to go layer and new layer and just click OK. It will create one the same size as all the others. So I have a new blank layer. It's just a blank transparency sat on the top at the minute. I'm definitely on that layer. Now, again, I know from messing around that the size of the lettering I want is about 60 pixels. Again, you probably have to play around with this until you've got the level you wanted. So I'm going to go 60 for the lettering size, and then I want to drag my box onto the picture here. And away we go. And I want the word Devilish. Okay, capital D, E-V-I-L-I-S-H. You can't see the H because the box isn't big enough, so I'll drag that box across a little bit more. That's okay. Okay, now I kind of need to move that a little bit because it's going over the edge of the right-hand horn as we look at it. So I'm going to move tool, and I'm going to move that to there. Okay. That'll do me. Okay, I'm going to go back into the text tool because I want to select every letter of the text. Because in order to get a kind of a red outline around the wording, which I had in my image, unfortunately, GIMP, because it's not a kind of a word processing tool, it doesn't give you much in the way of effects. It's not simple to put an outside edge around your lettering. We have to use a little trick to do it. So first off, I need to select all the letters. So I'm going to drag across every letter of Devilish. Okay, and then I'm going to right click on that. And what I'm going to do is I'm creating what's called a path from the text. So I'm selecting, so I've right clicked on the letters after selecting them, and then I click on path from text. Now, that doesn't appear to have done a great deal to the naked eye, but what it's actually done is it's created a path around the outside edge of every letter here. So I've now got kind of an empty path that actually is the word devilish. So I'm going to go onto the layer beneath our black here. Okay. And now we're on a blank layer underneath the black writing. And what I'm going to do is I'm now selecting from the path that I just created. So I'm going to select and I'm going doodly 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 dee from path. And there we go. Look, it's got our little path now, which means we've got a little blank path. Now, obviously, if I now fill this with red, I wanted a red outline. If I now try and fill this with red, it'll be absolutely useless because the black that's sitting over the top of it will completely obliterate the red. So I need to make my path a little bit bigger so that I've got a little bit of an edging around the outside of the word devilish. This will probably become more apparent when I actually show it working rather than me waffling and trying to explain, but let's go and actually do that. So in order to grow my path, I can go to select again, and this time I'm going to grow. Now I know, again, from messing around, 2 pixels is roughly what I want around the outside edge of this devilish. You could increase this to more than 2, but if you do, you're risking the red going over the top of the adjacent letters. So 2's probably, well, for me anyway, it's perfect. I'm going to keep at 2. Now I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see what's actually happened there. So I'm going to zoom in to 400 and scroll up. So you can probably just about see on the image, I've now got the word devilish, but I've got a blank area around the outside of every letter. That's actually 2 pixels wide, that blank area around the outside of every letter. So what I want to do now is I actually want to fill that with red. Now, I kind of always think it's better to use colors that are coordinated in your image. So you really want to select the red that's actually already on your image. Now, in order to select this red, we need to get down and click on the bottom layer. So let's go down and click on the bottom layer. Yeah, I don't know what that accent was either, never mind. Yes, bottom layer on the red. And again, if you remember from the first lesson, we're looking at our little teat pipette, which is our color picker tool. Click on that. Come down, click on the red. Hey presto, you'll see over here in our color box, we now have red as our foreground color. It's the same red as the devil's head. So I go back to my outline layer. And now what I want to do is I want to fill that outline with that color red. So in order to fill, we go over to the bucket tool. And that's now a bucket full of that lovely red. And now when I go over and click on any of these letters, it will actually fill the whole thing with red. So if I click on that, and hey presto, look at that. We have a red outline around our lettering. Now again, I do one more step on this. I kind of, just because in order to make it easy to move around, you probably want two layers together, because we have two layers here now with this lettering. We have the top layer, which is the black lettering, and we have the layer below it, which is the red lettering. So if I went to try and move, so if I go to Devilish, say this layer, if I try and move the lettering now, go to Move Tool and move, you'll see it doesn't bring the red with it. That's not what I want. I want to be able to bring both together. So just in case we need to move it, so I'm going to go Control Z, undo that. So what I want to do is I want to put these two layers actually as one. So on the top layer, the black one, I'm going to right click on that. And one of the options is to merge down. And what this will actually do is it'll put the top layer down on top of the one below it and create just the one layer. So merge down. Now those two layers have become one, and now if I go to move that around, it moves all together now. All together now. Yeah, okay, so let's just move that back to where it was. I can now select none. I don't need anything selected from there. There we have the word devilish. Okay, I'm going to go back to normal 100% view. And now I want the second word of our fictitious company, and that is design. So again, I want the lettering back on black, back to black. I'm sure someone said that. Okay, back to black, lettering. Obviously, I want to keep it the same size and the same font. Obviously, it needs to be consistent. Draw my box below the current box. And actually, just one thing actually I've just forgotten to do, which I told you to do for the previous one, is to create a new layer before we do any of this. So actually, layer, new layer. Okay. Okay, because we're going to do this on the new layer that we're actually on. Yes, so we need two new layers again. So we're going to do that. So text tool, draw the box again, get it right eventually. And we want the word design. So capital D, E-S-I-G-N. Bring that box in a bit tighter because I'm moving around. I'll move that bit. Okay, we want to move that a little bit. So go to the move tool. Let's just move it. Let's make sure I've got it actually right first before I move. Okay. If when you go to move, by the way, you can see a little no entry symbol appear there, that means you won't be able to move it when the no entry symbol is there. So once you've not got the no entry symbol, that does mean you're free to actually move the word around. Move it all around. Okay, so I'm going to say that's about where I want it. What we kind of want to make sure is that when we put the extra 2 pixels around the outside edge, that it's not touching any of the rest of the picture. That's kind of what we're looking to do. So again, I want the red outline underneath, so I'm going to go to the layer underneath in a second, but first I need to create my path. So I need to go back into the text tool. I want to select every one of those little letters. There we go. And right click again on those letters, and we want path from text. Hey presto, we've created our path from the word design. Go down to the layer underneath. And now what we want to do is we want to select from that path that we just created. Select from path. There we go. You can see the word design has appeared over here, top right. And again, we want to create that little extra bit around the outside edge before we fill it with the red. So we go to select and we go to grow, and we're going to leave that at 2 pixels and say OK. And again, fill tool, but obviously we want to change this back to red. I don't need to go and select the color again because your recently selected colors appear in the color box here. So I'm going to click on the red to select it, click OK. And once again, we want our bucket. So we go over to the bucket, click on the bucket, and then we want to come over and fill the red. So just make sure you click anywhere on one of the letters, and hey presto, There we go. We've got our lovely little red outline around the outside again. So select none. We don't need the selection anymore. I could move that around a little bit if I wanted to. I'm just going to zoom in on that a second just to see how that looks. No, there's enough of a gap there. That's okay. That's fine. I think I'll go back to 100%. And there you have it. I would say that's pretty much the end of this lesson. Thank God for that. I hear you all cry. So, as it says with my Wexford bunny, blah, 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 that's all, folks.